Hello and welcome to the Globetrotters Playbook in what is a 110% maximum sport edition. If you're a playbook completist, then you've already listened to the episode all about Athens and would have therefore heard the promise I made to reveal the difficulties I faced in creating this particular recording. A recording which is all about Greece and its relationship with rugby league. So, something about rugby league. Well, if you don't know, it's a sport essentially confined to Eastern Australia, where it's followed with religious ferocity, and also northwest England, where it's popular but often plays second fiddle to football. If you're not au fait with league, well, it's not rugby union. That's the All Blacks, Jonah Lomu, scrums, that kind of stuff. And it's by and large the second most popular of the rugby codes and struggles to get much of a name check outside of Brisbane and Wigan. But it does have a following in Greece, and that became my mission, to check out a match in the Greek Rugby League competition. So to the outskirts of Athens I headed, a 1 hour long expedition via the metro and a 6 p.m. kickoff in the women's first division. Night had fallen and I looked forward to being guided to the ground by the glow of the floodlights, the murmur of crowd anticipation and the smell of gyros. Keen listeners, by the way, will notice that my pronunciation of that word has developed radically from the last show, where I went with the rather blunt Anglo-Saxon interpretation of gyros. Apparently that's not how you say it. Anyway, as I got nearer to the stadium, something seemed amiss. There was no glow, there was no murmur, there was no smell, there was no game. It turned out that the match was off, and that is why I could only catch up with George Stylianos, president of the Greek Rugby League Federation, via a remote connection. In a moment, he's going to reveal the unique reasons why the game was cancelled, but I started by asking him about the game's history in Greece.
Okay, so born in Australia to Greek parents, and growing up, they were bringing us back and forth quite a bit. And I got from a young age, an obsession with Greece. And I always kind of half joking, half serious, said, I'm going to move there one day. So when I was in 2008, just finished my university degree in Brisbane, and I thought it's a now or never moment. You know, do I look for a full-time job or do I make a dash over and just see what happens? You know, I could be back in a month. I might never be back. Sort of completely open-minded. So yeah, moved over. Worked a lot of odd jobs, mostly in tourism. I did my military stint because that's mandatory for males in Greece. So I got that out of the way. And then it wasn't until 2012 until I met another guy named Tassos, who was, he kind of had a fallout with rugby union. He was involved with them at one stage, and then he had a few players come with him. He had literally three players with him. And then he said, because I'd put a Facebook page up saying, let's start Greek Rugby League and all that. So we got in touch. We found a little five-a-side field to train on. And then, word of mouth numbers started growing from there. And then in 2013, it really took off. We did a Facebook advertising campaign, which went really well, brought in loads of players. And then we were able to set up 4 teams. 3 teams in Athens. One was Rhodes Rugby Union, which defected to rugby league. And then, it's been a real roller coaster since then, but it's gotten stability, you could say, in the last 2 years since we got government recognition.
Oh, wow. Now, in my head, most of the players are going to be Aussie expats, but that's not necessarily the case, is it?
No, it's not the case at all, actually. There's a few of us who, again, older guys who usually help out coaching or refereeing. But in terms of the players, I'm actually trying to think of any at the moment. I know of one for sure. And then there's a couple of mixed nationalities, but the overwhelming majority are local Greeks.
And when the Greeks first hear about the game, first see the game, what's the general reaction? Is it one of curiosity? How would you describe it?
Yeah, a bit of curiosity, and I think they're impressed at the level of physicality of it as well. And I find in general when watch it and properly try to understand, it's quite easy to understand. They get the gist in 5 or 10 minutes. Quite often, I'll chat to parents on the sideline who have come to watch their kid play for the first time, and they say, yeah. By the end of the game, I knew exactly what was going on, and that's without anyone sitting and explaining the rules to them.
And that is key because if you compare rugby league to, its closest cousin, if you like, rugby union, league is far easier to understand, isn't it? That, in your opinion, plays a key role.
Definitely, and I think that's one of our biggest selling points because I feel like if someone's only just discovered it, uh, I'm pretty familiar with rugby union. I've seen it since a young age, and I still feel like there's so much, intrinsic rules about it that I have no clue about. So, yeah, rugby league, much simpler to understand. That's what I love about it.
Now, you touched on it a moment ago about there's a team over in Rhodes. That was one of the first teams. But how spread out are the teams at the moment? How far and wide has the game travelled?
So before the pandemic, we were quite spread across the country. We had in Western Greece, Patra, the third largest city in Greece, and then up in the north, Larissa, which is the fifth largest city. Those two sadly fell apart in the pandemic years. We do plan to help them rebuild, but it hasn't happened yet. So at the moment, we've just got a very Athens-centric league. Then we've got a female team on the west coast island of Zakynthos. And then in the east, we've got Rhodes in the men's division. So it's just those two that are the non-Athens teams at the moment.
And you face unique logistical problems, don't you, when it comes to travel? Give me a bit more about that.
Yeah, so Rhodes, I'll use that as the example. You've either got a choice, a 15-hour ferry ride or a 1-hour flight. So in this day and age, most of us fly. It's roughly the same price as the ferry anyway. And Rhodes have to make quite a few trips to Athens. So to save costs, they'll usually bring a squad of 20 plus players over. They'll play a match on the Saturday and a match on the Sunday, just so they can cut down on trips. It is tough on their bodies playing, back to back like that, but definitely reduces the costs a bit.
But also, when I was in Athens, one of the games was cancelled because of the weather conditions, but not because of, a pitch being waterlogged, because the ferries couldn't run.
Yeah, so the team was supposed to go from Athens to Zakynthos Island, and half of the girls went over from Friday night. Rough weather picked up on the Saturday, and they grounded all the ferries. And that lasted until Sunday afternoon. So they only had 6 girls over there, and then the rest couldn't get across. So that match had to be postponed as well, unfortunately. So stuff like that happens. We are prone to those sorts of things. And we play in winter as well. So there's been years even when there's been like snow or something cancelling matches. But
Wow.
yeah, it's the reality, I suppose, of what we have.
What about things like kit? I imagine, the clothing should be quite straightforward to get hold of, but, just straightforward things like balls and things like that. For example, I was speaking to the cricket team over in Menorca, and they had a huge amount of difficulty getting things like pads and cricket bats into the country from Great Britain because of controls
Yeah.
that have been brought in post Brexit. Is that something that you suffer from at all?
It is, yeah, it is. But again, going back to what we said about the simplicity of rugby league, it's great that, one ball is enough to hold a training session or play a game. So we're not as dependent on equipment as cricket, American football, ice hockey, those sports. But yeah, anything beyond balls, it can be tricky to get in. And we had a pallet of gear donated after the World Cup from some great people in England. God bless
Wow.
them. But when it arrived here, we ended up having to pay a few €100 in custom fees
Yeah.
and that to get it in. So, yeah, things that you guys probably take for granted, tackle shields, that type of thing, goalpost padding, very hard to get here, impossible, in fact, and we have to order it from abroad. Jerseys, we're very lucky. Amateur clubs in England and Australia over the years have donated, which has been great. It can be tricky getting them over here, but yeah, you wouldn't find a company here really that manufactures them.
What about the posts themselves? I can't imagine that rugby goalposts are knocking about all over Athens.
No, so that's where we have to get creative as well. We've got one field now that has permanent rugby posts, which is great. It's a little bit of a drive out of Athens, but it's there. In other fields, we either just tape literally what do you call them? Like plumbing pipes onto the soccer posts, sort of makeshift posts. Um, and then, yeah, look, if it's a low stakes game, no disrespect to anyone, but if we've got the first team against the last team or something, we don't even do that. We'll just use sort of imaginary posts. And to be honest, it's a game we know is not going to come down to a single conversion, if you know what I mean. So, yeah, we're always playing on soccer fields most of the time.
Yeah, and things like pitch markings as well. I imagine that could cause a few issues. I'm desperately trying to think of the term. It's not, the area over the try line. What do you call it? Oh, goodness me.
The try zone.
There we go. That'll do. But yeah, and
Oh,
marking out pitch mark like the try zone and things like that. How do you cope with that?
So what we usually do, because we play on soccer fields usually,
Mm,
it's not as difficult as you think. We in line with the 6 yard box. We
okay.
usually put some white, what do they call that tape? It's like a papery type tape.
Yeah. Masking
We
tape.
usually put that down, yeah, and run it all the way to the sideline. So that's not too difficult. But yeah, things like 40-20, we just say that we're not playing 40-20 because you've got the halfway line and the try lines. But again, it's really not the end of the world. We're lucky that as a sport we have roughly the same field dimensions as soccer. So yeah, it's manageable.
Let's move on to the national team now. Tell me a bit about the national team, how they're getting on, the other teams they play against, where they sit, I guess, in the International Rugby League pyramid.
Yeah, so the men's team at the moment, we're a little bit in no man's land because we're not in the World Cup qualifiers, even though we played at the last World Cup. We're not full members yet. So the only criteria we miss from being full members is having youth age teams, which we don't have at the moment, which we're working on. So that might take us a couple of years to achieve that. It's a pretty difficult task, to be honest. So yeah, we're sort of up in the air. We've got an upcoming friendly match with Norway, May 25th in Athens.
What kind of crowds would you get to a game like that?
Well, this time last year we played Serbia and we got about 1,000 spectators in.
Really? Wow.
Yeah. So we're aiming for a similar amount for this sort of match. And a week before that, we're going to have the women's team playing Serbia here, and that's actually a World Cup qualifier match. So the women's team is playing now in April against France, which we know we're going in as huge underdogs.
Yeah.
And then we play Serbia a month later here in Athens. And to progress to the next phase of qualifiers, we only need one win from those two matches. So definitely an achievable goal and one that we're hoping to get one win against Serbia if we're being realistic.
Are there any particular rivalries that Greece have in the rugby league world?
No, it's funny. Obviously, it's a physical match, and when you're on the field, it gets fiery and you want to
Yeah.
win. But it's funny, people have said to us like, "Oh, Greece against Turkey," or "Oh,
Yeah.
Greece against Albania," because of political stuff. But
Mm.
it's funny when you get there, we all know each other, and we're all, friends, sort of. So in a sort of unknown sport, minority sport like rugby league, that'll happen, where you tend to know one another. And so I wouldn't say there's a big rivalry. We've had a lot of matches with Serbia over the years. So I guess you could say there's a bit of a rivalry building there. But yeah, nothing, let's say, bad spirited or anything.
Oh, that's nice. And fingers crossed. What do you see the future being for rugby league in Greece?
Yeah, well, we're on an upward rise at the moment, so hopefully we're going to continue that way. Hopefully, like I say, we've become very Athens centric. Hopefully, we can start getting teams in different parts of Greece as well. which is a two-edged sword in itself because, more trips, more logistical headaches, but we'll find a solution to that as well. We always do. The women's game's important to us. We've got 4 teams, which we're hoping to consolidate and then eventually start growing. And then obviously, I guess ideally, the end goal is getting sort of more age levels involved as well, and then into schools if possible.
Okay, this podcast is meant to have some kind of travel element to it, so I'm going to pick at your brains for this. But you live in Athens. I presume you don't go and do the normal tourist stuff on a day-to-day basis. So, what would you say are the kind of almost the secret places to go, the places off the beaten track that a tourist wouldn't normally go to that you'd recommend?
Okay, it's funny you ask because rugby league's not my day job. I wish it was. My day job is in the travel industry. So I do tours in a van around Athens. I'll be starting in a few weeks. It's a seasonal job.
You do what? Athens. Sorry, reverse. Tourists in a van, did you say?
Yeah, so I drive a van, I should say.
Oh, okay.
And, so I do tours, like whether it's in Athens or the nearby places, Delphi, Corinth, those types of places. Look, I'll tell you one place. It's already famous, but it gets very overlooked in my opinion. It's called Meteora. It's in the north. It's these big monasteries up on the cliff tops, if you've heard of that. So that's a good option. If you want something more beachy, I would say southern mainland Greece. A lot of nice, remote, rugged beaches down there. But look, the great thing about Greece is anywhere you go, you're going to have a good time. I've been to 25 islands. I haven't been to one that I didn't like. So, and the food is awesome as well.
Beautiful. So, just give you a free ad. Do you have a website for your travel company?
Yeah, I mean, it's not my company. I'm just an employee, but it's called Olive Sea, SEA. So, yeah.
Cool. Yep. George, thank you so much for your time and best of luck with the Greek Rugby League Federation.
Thank you. Good luck with the podcast too.
That was George Stylianos, president of the Greek Rugby League Federation. Check out links to the episode in the show notes. Plenty of info there regarding the federation and also some of George's travel recommendations. In the next episode of the Globetrotters Playbook, I'll be heading to Madrid for some football action, but it's not quite as straightforward as you may think. And if you do have a moment, please follow, subscribe, like, share, rate, and talk warmly to your friends about the show. Rest assured, I do the same for you. Goodbye.